So what is the significance of these talks and how will they impact relations between China and its neighbors? Joining me now is Bonnie Glaser from the Center for Strategic and International Studies here in Washington. She's a senior advisor for Asia and the Freeman Chair in China Studies. Bonnie, thanks for being on our program.
Thank you.
So what is the significance of these talks? Certainly the first high-level security talks between the two nations, Japan and China, in 4 years.
Well, there has been a recent trend of thawing in the China-Japan relationship, including these recent talks, which I think is very welcomed by the United States and by the region since we saw Prime Minister Abe and Chinese President Xi Jinping meet last November. We have seen some progress towards the putting in place of a hotline between the militaries. We've also seen the scheduling of the talks between the two parliaments from both countries, and now the security talks on the planned trilateral between the foreign ministers. So I think that this is a good progress, re-engaging, talking about some of the differences and also some of the areas where the countries have cooperated in the past and can continue to cooperate, in particular this trilateral meeting coming up among the foreign ministers, where they have made progress in the past in areas such as disaster management and the environment. They might talk about other issues this time. And so I think that in these non-traditional areas, there is obvious overlap in the interests among Korea, China, and Japan.
So why do you think it took 4 years to get to this point?
Well, after the Japanese purchased 3 of what they call the Senkaku, and of course China calls the Diaoyu Islands, the Chinese government reacted very forcefully and really isolated Japan, cut off almost all channels of communication with Japan. Although the economic relationship continued, there's also been quite a diminishment of Japanese investment in China. And so I think over this period of 4 years, I think that China has failed to really achieve its goals of convincing the government in Tokyo, of admitting that a dispute exists over these islands. I think that perhaps Chinese government has recognized that the relationship has reached such a low point that it's really not in China's own interests to continue, because indeed China, Japan being the largest countries in the region, the world's second and third largest economies, have a lot of interests at stake. So I think that re-engaging is a very good sign.
Bonnie, of course, China also wants Japan to recognize its aggression in World War II. Do you see that as getting in the way of these discussions until Japan actually does that? Will there be any substantive progress?
Well, I think that this year obviously is a sensitive year with the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. China's planning a military parade and other commemoration events. I do think that there are concerns in China about how Japan looks at its history. And so I think that there's to some extent a waiting game. China will see what Prime Minister Abe has to say about the war when he comes to the United States. And that is only a month or so away. And then I think that will be a signal to China as to whether or not that's enough for the Chinese to re-engage more with Japan. So yes, I do think that Beijing has concerns about how the Japanese are talking about history, whether or not the two statements by Murayama and Kono are going to be adhered to, or whether Prime Minister Abe is going to seek to in any way revise those statements, and how he will talk about Japan's role in history.